It was the sound that first alerted me. A faint scraping, like the slow drag of nails across glass. I was only a boy, not more than 10 or 12, but I knew then that something was terribly wrong. The old house had always been a place of whispers, the kind of whispers that make you freeze in your tracks and listen closely, almost as if the house itself was alive, watching. But that night, those whispers were louder, more insistent, and they led me to the window. I remember how the moonlight shone through the curtains, casting long shadows across the room, giving everything a sickly glow. The window was large, stretching from the floor to the ceiling, framed with dark, peeling wood that had weathered years of neglect. But it wasn't the window itself that drew me in, it was the shape outside. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, a figment of my imagination. After all, the house had a way of playing tricks on you, making things look like something they weren't. But as I got closer, I saw it more clearly. A figure. Tall and thin, its limbs twisted in unnatural angles, its face, no, not a face, but a void, a dark, gaping maw where eyes should have been. The thing was trapped, clawing at the window, pressing its twisted body against the glass, trying to break through. I felt a cold rush of fear surge through me, paralyzing me where I stood. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't scream. All I could do was watch, my hands trembling, my heart pounding in my chest like it was going to burst. But then I heard her, "John," my mother called from down the hall, her voice cracking, "Don't go near the window." Her words cut through the fog of terror, pulling me from my trance. I wanted to run to her, to hide, but my feet were rooted to the spot. And then, as if on cue, the thing outside smiled. Or at least, I think it did. Its mouth stretched wide, impossibly wide, its teeth jagged and sharp, each one glistening with a light that shouldn't have been there. It knew I had seen it. It knew I was afraid. I don't remember what happened after that. 1 minute, I was staring at the thing, and the next, I was in my mother's arms, safe in the warmth of her embrace, as she whispered over and over that everything was going to be okay. But I knew it wasn't. I knew something had changed, that something had awoken in that house, and it wouldn't let me go. The house had been abandoned for years before we moved in. My mother had always told me that it had a dark past, but she never went into detail. All I knew was that it had once belonged to a wealthy family, who had mysteriously vanished without a trace. And then, for reasons unknown, it had sat empty, rotting, decaying, until we came along. But now, looking back, I wonder if that was part of the plan. Were we always meant to find the house? To awaken whatever had been waiting for us there? I can't say for certain. But one thing I know without a doubt, that thing outside the window wasn't the first of its kind. And it wouldn't be the last. After that night, the house felt different. It was as if the air itself had thickened, filled with something oppressive, something heavy. Every step I took felt like a burden, each creak of the floorboards beneath my feet echoing through the silent halls like the warning of something that was about to arrive. And I could feel it, that presence, lurking in the shadows, just out of sight, watching, waiting. It wasn't just the window anymore. I couldn't look at it without feeling my chest tighten, my breath catch in my throat. The very thought of it, of that thing, pressing its face against the glass, grinning with its horrible, toothless smile, made me shudder. But there was more to it, something deeper, more unsettling. The house itself seemed to be reacting, as if it had been awakened by the thing outside, as if it were connected to it in some unholy way. Every night, I would hear the scratching again, faint at first, like the sound of nails dragging across stone. But soon, it grew louder, more insistent, and it wasn't coming from the window anymore. It was coming from the walls. I spent hours awake in the dark, listening as the sounds moved, shifting, scraping, tapping, traveling from room to room like the house itself was alive. I tried to tell my mother, tried to explain to her that something was wrong, but she would only shake her head, dismissing my fears as childish imagination. "You're just seeing things, John," she'd say. "The house is old, that's all. Old houses make noises." But it wasn't just the noises. It was the way their house seemed to shift, the way it felt as though it was constantly changing, growing, like something was expanding inside of it. The air grew colder in certain rooms, despite the fire burning in the hearth. The doors would close on their own, the lights would flicker, and there was always a feeling of being watched, even when no one was around. One evening, after another long day of feeling like I was being chased by something unseen, I decided to explore. I had to know what was causing the sounds, what was behind the scratching, the tapping, the whispering. I crept through the darkened halls, my heart racing in my chest, my feet barely making a sound as I moved from room to room. Each room seemed to have its own energy, its own presence, like they were all living, breathing things with minds of their own. I finally reached the basement door. The cold air radiated from the crack beneath it, and I hesitated for a moment. My hand hovered over the doorknob. I could feel the pulse of something below, a thrum in the pit of my stomach, urging me to open it. But at the same time, I knew I shouldn't. I'd heard the stories. Everyone knew about the basement. It was where the family had disappeared all those years ago, where strange things had been said to happen. But my curiosity outweighed my fear. I turned the handle, the door creaked open with a low, mournful sound, revealing a narrow staircase that descended into darkness. I could feel the air grow colder as I stepped inside, the faint smell of mildew and decay filling my nostrils. My breath came in shallow gasps as I took the first step, and then the next. Each step felt like a lifetime, the silence pressing down on me like a weight. But then, as I reached the bottom, I heard it. A low growl, distant but unmistakable. My heart skipped a beat. The growl came again, louder this time, followed by the unmistakable sound of something scraping against stone, claws, scraping, dragging, closer now, much closer. I was frozen. I couldn't move. I could feel the hair on the back of my neck stand up, and in that moment, I knew, with every fiber of my being, that I was not alone. There was something down there, something waiting. I slowly turned toward the wall to my right, where the growling had seemed to come from. It was hard to see anything in the dark, but I could just make out a faint shape, a shadow that didn't belong. And then I saw it. The thing. It was crawling along the floor, its body twisted and contorted in ways that no human being should ever be able to move. Its skin was pale and mottled, like old, rotting flesh, and its eyes, if you could call them eyes, were deep, dark pits, endless voids that seemed to pull at my very soul. Its mouth opened, wide and jagged, revealing rows of teeth, each one sharper than the last. But it wasn't the teeth that terrified me. It was the way it looked at me. As if it knew me. As if it had been waiting for me. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over my own feet as I scrambled up the stairs, my heart racing in my chest. The growl followed me, echoing in the dark, getting louder, more urgent. It wanted me. And it wouldn't stop until it had me. When I reached the top of the stairs, I slammed the door shut behind me, my hands trembling as I fumbled for the lock. The sound of claws scraping against wood echoed in my ears, but I didn't dare open it to look. I didn't dare face it again. I ran back to my room, slamming the door behind me, and collapsed onto my bed. My breath came in ragged gasps, my body slick with sweat. And as I lay there, trembling, I heard it again. A whisper, soft and chilling, coming from somewhere inside the walls. It's not over yet. The house had never been more alive than it was that night. I don't remember how long I had been trapped inside my room, the door locked tight behind me, my body shaking with fear. The shadows seemed to grow longer with each passing hour, stretching across the walls like dark fingers, pulling me deeper into the darkness. I could hear their whispers now, soft and insistent, like the voices of those who had come before me, warning me of what was to come. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to leave. I could feel it in my bones, the dread that was building in the pit of my stomach. I knew I couldn't stay there forever. Whatever had been awakened in that house, whatever had been stirring beneath the surface, was coming for me. And it was getting closer. The scratching came again. But this time, it wasn't just on the walls. It was at the door. I tried to ignore it, tried to pretend that it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but the sound grew louder, more urgent, until it was all I could hear. My heart was pounding in my ears, and every fiber of my being screamed at me to run. But where could I go? The house was a maze, its walls shifting and closing in on me like a trap. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that there was nowhere I could hide that would keep me safe. Then came the scream. It wasn't mine. It wasn't anyone I knew. It came from somewhere deep within the house, a scream of pure terror, of agony, followed by an eerie silence. It wasn't just the sound of a victim. It was the sound of something being consumed, of something being torn apart from the inside out. And it was coming closer. I tried to open the window, to climb out and escape, but the glass was stuck. The cold air that had been seeping in from the cracks now felt suffocating, pressing against me like a weight. Panic surged through me. I wasn't alone anymore. I could feel it. Whatever it was close. The door slammed open with a deafening crash, and I turned, too late to react. The thing that stood in the doorway was no longer just a shadow. It had form now, and that form was nightmare incarnate. It was taller than any man, its limbs unnaturally long and twisted, its body gaunt, covered in sickly, decayed flesh that hung from its bones like a broken doll. Its face, or rather, the absence of one, was a hollow, gaping void, empty and vast, like looking into an endless pit. There was nothing human about it. It was something older, something far darker, and its eyes. They weren't eyes at all. They were black, hollow pits, sucking in the very light around them, and they were locked on me. It stepped into the room with a sickening sound, its feet dragging across the floor like it was walking on glass. The air grew even colder, the darkness thickening as it came closer, its presence suffocating. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. John, the voice came from nowhere, from everywhere. It was a whisper, but it felt like a roar, as though it was speaking directly into my mind. I've been waiting. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs wouldn't move. My mind was locked in a cage of terror. I could feel the thing drawing closer, its breath hot and foul against my skin. I closed my eyes, praying it was all a dream. But when I opened them, it was still there. Then, just as I thought it would reach me, something changed. A burst of light, a crack of thunder that shook the house to its core. The thing recoiled, its form flickering like a dying flame, its hollow eyes widening in shock and pain. The walls around me groaned and cracked, as if the house itself were resisting the presence that had taken root within it. In that instant, I realized the truth. The house wasn't just a home, it was a prison. And it wasn't the monster that had been trapped here. It was me. We were both bound to it, connected by something far deeper than I could comprehend. And if I didn't escape, if I didn't break free, I would become part of it too. With every ounce of strength, I bolted toward the door, pushing past the thing, my breath ragged, my heart pounding in my chest. It reached for me, its claws scraping the air just inches from my skin. But I didn't stop. I ran through the halls, the walls closing in around me, the house twisting and warping, as if it were trying to hold me back. I reached the front door. It was locked. But I didn't hesitate. I threw myself against it, my body crashing into the wood. For a moment, I thought it would break me. But then, the door gave way. I stumbled outside, gasping for air, the cold night air hitting my lungs like a rush of water. I turned to look at the house, expecting to see it looming behind me, but instead, I saw nothing. The house was gone. There was nothing but empty land, a field stretching out into the distance. The wind howled through the trees, but there was no sign of the thing, no sign of the house. It was as if it had never existed, but as I turned to walk away, I felt it, deep in the pit of my stomach. That same cold, gnawing fear. The monster was still there, still waiting. It had never really left, and it would never let me go.